Hello and welcome to my channel, and welcome to a new series. This I will probably sit on for a little bit of time before I come up with a name. It might be Theological Tuesday or Theological Thursday. I don't know. I don't know about the alliteration thing. Anyway, I am going to do a read along of a book, Letters to a Lady by Philip Baker, while I do the Diamond Art Club Mandie Manzano version of Who You Say I Am. I got this painting a while ago and immediately thought of this book as something to read along, and I guess the read-alongs were a little bit popular back then as well, so it kind of inspired me. Anyway, a little bit of background on this book. Philip Baker used to be a pastor over in Perth. I lived over in Perth in 2004 to 2005, I think, or 2005 to 2006. Anyway, he was pastor over in Riverview Church. He inspired me in so many ways. He actually converted me to drink coffee, believe it or not, because I didn't drink it until he raved about it. I got the privilege of being able to join the church, and I had the privilege of sitting under his teaching, and not only that, I had the privilege of him signing my book, because it's my namesake or his namesake, and we got to, or I got to be friends with this man and got to be part of an admin team of a website where we had, I think, regular online spiritual discussions, including debating with trolls. So it was fun, but there was some really deep and meaningful stuff that came out from some of the readings at that time. And as I say, I was very, very privileged to be a part of that. A bit of background with this book. It was written by him as a book in 2001. It actually started off as a message he preached in church on Mother's Day in 2000. Philip comes from a family with one sister, I believe, Penny. Very, very strong sister, and his wife and 3 daughters who are still friends. He writes that not many men write books about the power of the woman, but then again, not many men are surrounded by so many powerful women, and he actually wanted to write a book about powerful men, but he didn't know any. If you ever get to watch, I don't know if he's on YouTube, to be honest, he's English, and he's got the funniest of accents. He's got an awesome presentation. Yes, fond memories of him. Now he's got an excerpt here on the first page, or one of the first pages, from The Grapes of Wrath from John Steinbeck. I'll try and read it because it's in the cursive writing, so it's a little bit trickier, so I'll do my best. She seemed to know, to accept, to welcome her position, the citadel of the family, the strong place that could not be taken. And since old Tom and the children could not know hurt or fear unless she acknowledged hurt or fear, she had practiced denying them in herself. And since, when a joyful thing happened, they looked to see whether joy was on her. It was her habit to build up laughter and out of inadequate materials, but better than joy was calm. Bear with me. Imperturbability could be depended on, and from her great and humble position in the family she had taken dignity and a clean, calm beauty. From her position of healer, her hands had grown sure and cool and quiet. From her position of arbiter, she had become a remote and faultless in judgment as a goddess. She seemed to know that if she swayed, the family shook, and if she really deeply wavered as despaired, the family would fall. The family will to function would be gone. Now, this is a book, and it's based on the Hebrew alphabet. There are 22 chapters in this, and I will do a read along as I do a bit of a whip, work in progress. Now, his introduction says, "Let me confess from the outset that I have 2 main passions in my life, letters and women. The former are tools of my trade, being a pastor, speaker and author. The latter, well, I'm surrounded by the latter. I have 3 daughters, 1 wife, 2 mothers, 1 mother-in-law, 4 sisters, and at least 25 staff members, 3 board members, 1 dog and 1 cat, all of which are female. And I have only one thing to say: help! It may come of no surprise that I feel uniquely qualified to write a book that not only briefly describes the hidden meaning of the Hebrew alphabet, but does so within the context of describing a virtuous woman. Proverbs 31, verses 10 to 31 is one of a handful of biblical acrostics. Simply said, an acrostic is a Hebrew ABC. Each of these 22 verses describe the noble woman. Begins with a different Hebrew letter, from Aleph, verse 10, the equivalent to our A, through to Tau, the equivalent to our Z. Hebrew, unlike English, has 22 letters, so it all works out pretty well. What is even more interesting is that each Hebrew letter is a picture, and that picture, more often than not, has a meaning. What makes this really exciting is the meaning of the letter corresponds to the teaching of each verse. The original version for acrostics was to aid in memorization. In the same way that it would be easier to memorize 26 alphabetically arranged vegetables than it would 26 arbitrary ones, so it was hoped men the world over would be able to memorize 22 great things about women. Alas, the male of the species gave up after 3 letters, and the wisdom of Proverbs 31 was lost to men and women alike. So history continued without the input of this wisdom. Thus we experienced the cultural disempowerment of women, the increasing of an entrenched male chauvinism, and James Bond. Anyway, that was until this book awoke a new generation around the world to the truth of the virtuous woman. So the first letter is Aleph. I will put the image of Aleph up into the corner so that you can actually see what this picture, because it's important that you get the pictures, does with this. Proverbs 31:10 says, "Who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies. A good woman is hard to find and worth far more than diamonds." It's from the Message. I should say, Mandie has done this work. It's part of her spiritual series. And Who You Say I Am. If you haven't seen the image, it's in the thumbnail that you'll see to your right. It shows God's hands holding the woman in his hands, and she's holding the crown, and then there's some other treats amongst the rest of the picture. And I believe Mandie actually quotes from Proverbs 31 in reference to this painting or image. Aleph. We begin with a summary, a simple statement that encapsulates all that is to follow. Indeed, verses 11 to 31 are merely the commentary, an explanation, a detailed analysis, a picture, if you like, of the character and characteristics of this virtuous woman. It's also interesting to note that this passage extolling the wonders of the woman are the closing thoughts as to what's probably considered to be one of the greatest books on wisdom ever to have been written. In fact, throughout the book, wisdom is personified as a lady, and the fool, simpleton, and the lazy are unfortunately all too often characterized in the male gender. Now, obviously, I feel it would be wrong to read too much into this. If feminism is defined as treating ladies as equals in every area of life, then certainly the Book of Proverbs would come down to firmly being pro-feminist position. It is all the rage, of course, at the moment to try and move the traditional idea and concept of God away from being male, and the church culture from being male gender dominated. Certainly, Scripture describes God as both male and female, with both having male and female characteristics. Of course, if God is God, then he transcends all narrow gender definitions. However, secretly I feel such debate is a ploy of the devil. She will try and bring division into the church wherever and whenever she can. However, away from such musings, the content of this volume is, you'll be most relieved to know, not about such matters. It is, however, clearly about not just how God sees women, but how the male species should treasure and esteem her as well. A myth that has been perpetrated by the sort of religious chauvinism which is still alive and well in many churches around the world is that the woman's place is not only in the home, but is intrinsically subservient to the male as well. Jesus, the early church, and the writer of the Book of Proverbs would decry such a philosophy at the top of their collective voices. This virtuous woman, we shall see, is both a homemaker and a businesswoman. both aggressive and tender. She is both sexually alive and spiritually alert. She is what God designed a woman to be. Her description is not given in such a way as to hold up an ideal and thereby condemn or depress all those who are falling short of it. It is rather given to inspire, to paint a picture that could be, and declare that every woman has great nobility and sadly and often unappreciated value. To declare to every man that the most wonderful and most valuable, the most beautiful and most fascinating and fulfilling endeavour he could ever experience will be discovered within a relationship with the crown and glory of God's creation, the lady who walks softly by his side. This introductory verse, then, a virtuous woman who can find her price is far above rubies, is given almost as an invitation to the male of the species. She is there, yet she is hidden in the garden awaiting to be found. An understanding of her nobility and a pledge to esteem and treat her in accordance with her value is to enable us to truly find her. The Hebrew letter that begins this verse is, of course, the first in the Hebrew alphabet, the letter Aleph. The Aleph is a picture of oxen ploughing. Ah, of course, I see it now, I hear you exclaiming. I guess the original Aleph actually looked like oxen ploughing. Now we just have to believe the lexical historians. The ox throughout Scripture had several different meanings. First and foremost, it literally meant strength. The ox was the chief working animal on the farm because of its strength, and is renowned for its ability to sustain an incredibly heavy workload. The ox is also a sign of prosperity. This was because oxen didn't come cheap. Indeed, in the sacrificial system referred to in Leviticus, the rich were asked to sacrifice an ox. And in accordance with economic worth, people were allowed to sacrifice a cow, a goat, a sheep, all the way down to a dove. Leviticus chapter 5 makes a point that if you can't afford a dove, then so much meal is considered satisfactory. In another passage in 1 Kings 19:19, we discover Elisha ploughing with 12 head of oxen. His family farm was obviously a very successful one, which makes his subsequent calling into ministry by Elijah even more noteworthy. In that, what he was leaving was all the probability a sizable inheritance. Notice how the text of the verse, a virtuous woman who can find her price is far above rubies, is mirrored by the Hebrew letter and its meaning. And as we have already discussed, the rest of this acrostic simply delineates how much value, how much strength, how much prosperity and worth this virtuous woman actually brings her life to touch the lives of those around. The comparison is made in the King James Version of the Bible to rubies. Another translation speaks of jewels, Good News Bible, gems, the Living Bible, pearls, Jerusalem Bible, and even coral, New English Bible. I'm not sure whether I like the last one. It could mean, of course, that she is very colourful or she is very sharp, cutting, and dangerous. The point of all these is that they are not found on the surface. They are underground or underwater, and as we've already hinted at, only those who are prepared to search, to expend energy and effort, will see her true beauty. I'm writing, of course, from the male point of view, yet this is equally true from the female perspective, in that within us all are deep and wonderful things. Our responsibility is to unearth them, to not allow the naysayers to declare that nothing is there and simply throw more dirt onto our lives. Unfortunately today, most of us will find it easy to believe what the others say and difficult to believe our own aspirations and dreams. Just this last week, as I was standing at a checkout in our local supermarket, a gentleman walked up to me who recognized me and asked if I had written any more books. After he had gone, the young checkout operator, she must have been 19 or 20, said with a look of great interest, "Oh, you're a writer." She then went on to say she'd always wanted to be a writer and in fact had started a book, but then somebody who was close to her had told her it was a stupid idea. I told her that most of the great books of the world were written by people who simply hadn't listened to what everyone had said and encouraged her to pick up her pen once more. Yet here is one illustration of what must happen every day into multiple lives. The treasure within is pushed deeper down, and as a result, the gift, the virtue, the real person never gets to the surface. One attorney tried to assess the value of a wife and mother. He noted that she was chauffeur, gardener, family counsellor, maintenance person, cleaner, housekeeper, cook, errand runner, bookkeeper, manager, interior decorator, dietitian, PR, hostess, as well as working in an external job. The yearly salary for this unpaid work he figured was, at a bare minimum, being around $100,000 US dollars per annum. Remember, this is back in 2000. If the majority of women were paid what they actually do, there would hardly be a house in the country that could afford her. Let me be quick to add, just in case my wife is reading this, that I'm not suggesting that people should be paid, either men or women, for what they do in these capacities. I'm simply making the point that we should never underestimate the value of her role.
Who am I that the highest king would welcome me? I was lost, but he brought me in. Oh, his love for me. Oh, his love for me. Who the sun sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. Free at last, he has ransomed me, his grace runs deep. While I was a slave to sin, Jesus died